meeting. We want introductions first. So I'm Carol Walker, on the board, community member.
Stan Roberts.
April Nilsson, Secretary.
Chris Shirkey, Public Works Director.
Lane Ray, Water Section Manager.
Reed Price, Maintenance Division Manager.
Neil Winterton, Water Resources for the City of Warren.
Dane Carter, Fleet Manager.
Cody Stengel, Streets Manager. Giles Timke, Water Reclamation Section Manager.
All right, thank you. So it says breakfast on here, so I'm assuming that means that help yourself to breakfast. April's so good to get that great variety for us. We don't have a quorum to approve the minutes.
We do not.
So we will have to, can we do that by email?
I'll have to follow up.
See if
on
we
that
can do
and see
that,
if we
okay.
can. Yeah, but we may want to flip the next two items because of the lack of
Okay,
numbers here. Our city council has made many changes to boards and commissions to allow for greater flexibility and to just make them a little more relevant and current. And so in many cases, in most cases, the boards and commissions, the total number on the committee have been reduced. And so in our case, for Public Works Advisory Commission, we're at 9 currently, and it was proposed and approved to go to 7. On the screen up here, you can see who is on the committee or has been most recently. This is what we have in our records. As you look at this, this group here, the group that you came in with, Carol,
right.
your terms expired technically March 1st of
Oh, a long time ago.
2019. However, the code changes also allow for members of the committee to extend beyond that time as deemed appropriate and as agreed upon, if you would be so willing. And so this is something we need to reach out. We could start with you, Carol. I don't know if you would have an interest in continuing. I know that you're now employed in Salt Lake.
I have been though, so yeah, but that works in Draper.
Oh, in Draper?
Yeah, so.
Is that okay?
It's not, the nice thing about it is usually not a conflict with this meeting, but I would like to continue.
You would?
If you would like that,
Okay.
so.
I'm going to change this to, she wants to stay.
Who's that? Chairman of the board.
Chairman, that's.
Oh, is that what I get? Yeah.
With that much enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it's so interesting because it's kind of out of my purview of what I normally do. So I've learned so much about the city and able to share what's going on with Public Works, with other people in the community.
Okay. Stan, I noticed that yours was actually August 1st of 2018. Does that sound right? Or maybe 19. It was 19 on here.
When you,
That says 21.
I did change it, yeah. So on our dashboard online.
Yeah, because Val and I came on at the same time, didn't we? I
Yeah,
think.
well, you did, but he was reappointed. This is our tracking sheet right here, which may or not be entirely accurate. This shows 8/1/18, and I think maybe you had a 2-year. I don't know. How long have you been on? Has it been 2 years?
Well, it's been more than 2 years.
Some
it's
of
been
us,
3.
when it was first forced, some of us had 3 and some had 2 years, right? It was
Yes, it was staggered.
staggered.
Oh, and that's another thing that it changed is that everyone will just remain as 3 because people come and go. Not according to that original design, I would suggest. So this states that Stan, you weren't reappointed, but I was thinking that you had been. So I think this record here is incorrect. So you would be in your 2nd term right now, and so that would be 8/1/21 if you would like to continue to do that. Val has expressed an interest in continuing, Devin Rich as well. And then two that have recently met their term limit, the former term limit was Drew Clark and Todd Hadley. Todd is the end of his first term, although I haven't seen him for a while. And then we have Drew Clark, who is the vice chair currently, because we haven't made any formal changes there. Drew mentioned that he was going to be here, right?
He did not,
Oh, he did not?
no.
Okay.
Devin mentioned that.
Oh, was it Devin?
Devin said he would be here.
Okay. So there's four, and then I have spoken a little bit with Casey. He suggested maybe that somebody else fill his spot. Although I haven't talked to him about this option now, where you could extend. He did throw out a couple of names from Central Utah Water Conservancy District. So you can see we have four that are on, and then two that need to be renewed, and so we'd be lacking maybe one position. Luke Peterson moved, and that's why he was.
Oh, did he
taken off.
move? Oh,
Yeah. Is that right, Reed? He moved to
Vineyard now.
Vineyard, so, yeah, he was removed when he moved. In any case, that's the background on the new changes. We would need to probably have a vote by a quorum in order to designate or to vote on a new chairperson and vice chair. I know Drew is currently the vice chair, so I think I just need to reach out to individual members in the meanwhile. But Carol, you would like to continue then?
I would, unless you have somebody else in mind
Do not.
you would like to serve.
I will pass it on to the city council then. And so, any other thoughts on attendance, on committee, on quorum? How to improve? I mean, everyone was coming there for quite a while, and then
When we were talking about
master plans
utopia
and
and master
utopia.
plan.
Yeah.
We need a hot issue, yeah. Which you don't want, right?
Right.
Right. So are there any issues that are in your mind that you think that you would like to learn more about, or that we should review at this level with this committee? I'll leave that as an open question,
Okay.
and then I'm going to solicit feedback then individually from committee members.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So we've gone over that. Now let's go with, I have to get my glasses on so I can read that. Shall I go back to the VW grant update? You want to
Yes.
do that? And who's
Yes.
going to present that? You are.
I will.
Excellent.
That's the reason you came today, right, Carol?
I wanted to hear it.
All
I know
right.
who you're presenting.
Well, you've probably heard in the news a couple years ago that Volkswagen got in big trouble. They were caught cheating, and so some people have termed this this crisis in their organization Dieselgate.
Which people have termed it that?
The media.
Oh, I wasn't sure if it was just you.
No. Yeah, this was a stolen term that as I've researched this, that there have been people that have called it Dieselgate. So, in September of 2015, the EPA issued a notice of violation of the Clean Air Act against Volkswagen because their investigation had found that they had been doing some naughty things. What they did was they had what's called a defeat device put into some of the models of their cars that was designed to beat the emission testing in their diesel engines. The catalytic converter doesn't work very well in diesel engines because it produces a lot of smoke, as you've seen with trucks driving down the road. And what they did was they took what's called the engine control unit and programmed it to where it would recognize that a car was being tested for emissions, and it would switch to a good fuel economy mode, which would decrease the amount of pollution coming out, so it would pass the test. However, when it would be driving, that engine control unit would switch to a poor fuel economy mode, and it would cause much more pollution than was expected. They installed these on diesel vehicles between the years 2009 and 2016, 11 million cars worldwide, of which 580,000 vehicles were in the U.S. and 7,000 here in Utah.
So this wasn't an accident.
This was not
It
an
was
accident.
very deliberate and intentional.
So why would they do that? Well, they wanted to have better performance. They wanted their cars to still be fast, and but you can't get good fuel economy and at the same time comply with the pollution requirements. Also, if they could, when they had their cars tested, if they could show that they had low emissions, then it would enable the company to receive green car subsidies and also tax exemptions in the United States. There were programs that if you purchased a car that was a low polluter, then you could get some benefits. So it was a way that they could market their cars as well, and probably increase the number of sales because of that. So how did they find out? Well, there was an organization called the International Council on Clean Transportation, which is an independent body in Europe, and they were just curious, wondered, yeah, we should test these things in action on the road rather than in a workshop, just not expecting to find anything, but wanted to prove that cars were green as green as they were advertised to be. And so they conducted some on-road tests, and they decided to use U.S. vehicles because the regulations are more strict. The cars that were being sent to the U.S. should have been outfitted with better anti-pollution technology than those found in Europe. And they found some discrepancies in the Volkswagen Passat and Jetta, but no discrepancies in the BMW XS. And so it had them scratching their head, wondering, is this just an experimental error, or it's odd that Volkswagen would have pollution but BMW wouldn't? So they continued some studies. Some professors and students at West Virginia University received a grant to continue to do some further testing, and in 2014 also they duplicated those results and found that the Volkswagen Jetta exceeded the U.S. emission limits by a factor of 15 to 35, and the Passat by a factor of 5 to 20, which is a significant amount of pollution. Now keep in mind, these vehicles, when tested for the emissions, would be showing that they were within reasonable levels to pass the emissions test. So they figured out that something was wrong. So they got in big trouble. The first slide showed that Department of Environmental Quality, or the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, filed charges against them for violating the Clean Water Act. So they got in big trouble. There were three different, when they got in trouble, it took a little bit, but they eventually admitted it, so that there was an engineer, several engineers who deliberately made some software changes to allow this to happen. But the company was in trouble, so they settled with EPA and the court system in three different areas. The first was a buyback or emission control modifications, which cost them $10.8 billion.
And this is just worldwide, or just
This is just
US?
the U.S., so there were other penalties elsewhere in the world. So $10.8 billion. the customer could sell their car back to Volkswagen, or Volkswagen could fix the problem if they really liked their car. But between the buyback and retrofitting the engine, that particular portion was going to cost them $10.8 billion. There's also an investment that they had, which was zero emission vehicle investment. Zero emission is primarily electric vehicles. So they provided $2 billion to have electric charging stations or other infrastructure installed that would make it easier for zero emission vehicles to be in our communities. And then the last one is the Environmental Mitigation Trust, and that's to mitigate against the pollutants that were put into the environment due to them cheating. So over the 6 or 7 years that this was happening, there was excess noxious gases that were put into the environment, and so one way for us to remove them is to remove gases in the future. So if we can get old trucks off the road quickly that we were planning on driving for a long time, then that would remove pollution that was put in the past.
But it doesn't, obviously, all that's already in the environment stays
It's
there.
already
There's
there.
no way to
Yeah,
get
we,
rid of
we,
it.
we can't really get rid of that. So, so this trust was created so that they're going to their penalty is $2.9 billion to invest in new equipment to prevent pollution into the future, to kind of to mitigate for what they did in the past. So all of that money was divided among all of the states in the United States, and big mighty Utah was able to lobby to get $35 million, which is a small amount compared to the 4.9 billion that was made available. But again, it's not a tiny amount, considering our population compared to other areas. So once it was determined that Utah would be getting $35 million, the governor asked our Department of Environmental Quality to administer the funding and create a plan for how to distribute the $35 million in the way that was approved by the courts and the trust that was created. So the plan identified the different types of vehicles that they would replace and the equipment that would reduce the excess emissions. So of the $35 million, $25.7 million was earmarked to replace local freight trucks and school shuttle and transit buses, so 73.5% of that money. There was also $2.45 million that was put into a Diesel Emissions Reduction Act replacement plan, which I learned about recently. That's a recurring grant program where anybody with a diesel fleet when they replace it, can apply for funding to help subsidize their fleet replacement, as long as it's got some good diesel emissions reduction components on the vehicles. So that's been an ongoing grant program, and they're adding money from the Volkswagen grant into that grant program. And the third is $3.85 million for light duty zero emissions vehicle supply equipment. That was that zero emission vehicle investment, $2 billion. So that's electric charging stations primarily. And then the last one is $2.97 million for administration costs. So I'm sure that the trust allowed 8.5% of whatever was awarded for administration. Of course, the state's is going to take all they can of that.
So these are the types of vehicles that were identified. But prior to that, though, they also looked at across the board, city or statewide, geographically, they looked at areas that would be qualifying.
Yes, of the 7,000 vehicles that were in, that were purchased and used in Utah, most of them were in Utah County, Salt Lake County, Davis, Weber counties. So those if as they were determining how to distribute the money, if you were a municipality that was in those areas, you received priority of that. You were in an area where those vehicles were, so more pollution was created there. So they want to replace vehicles there to mitigate the past pollution. So they created this grant process, and the first grant was for the zero emission vehicle investment, or the electric charging stations. There were 18 government agencies that received awards, and every application that was completed and sent in was approved. So if you were a municipality and you wanted to put some electric charging stations on your city's property somewhere, you got the money. There were 11 municipalities that applied, 3 educational institutions, 4 state, county, and federal agencies. A total of $3.8 million was awarded. There were 96 level 2 chargers, which are slower chargers, and 26 DC fast chargers.
How did that benefit Orem?
We'll get there. You're jumping to the punchline.
You've got us all revved up to know what happened.
The other component was to replace vehicles. Again, it was to replace local freight trucks, school, shuttle, and transit buses. This one had a little more competition. There were 50 applications that were received. 379 vehicles were proposed to be replaced, a total of $72 million. But remember, just $25 million was available, so it was fairly competitive. There were 14 government agencies that were selected, of which only 6 were municipalities. 5 were school districts, replacing primarily school buses. 2 state and county agencies, and 1 transit. That you can guess who that transit agency is.
Yeah, we just have one transit.
So that was UTA, and UTA, if you, they got about half of the money. So,
Why does that surprise you?
Right.
they're doing a bunch of electric buses, but 104 vehicles will be replaced. That's 25.5, and again, that's 25.5 million that was awarded. So how did this, what did Orem request? Well, we asked to install 4 electric vehicle fast charging stations at the city center. And I told you earlier that if you applied, you got the money. So to cut to the chase on that one, we will be getting 4 electric vehicle fast charging stations. And again, that's 50-50 funded. So we have to come up with 50% of the cost. But 50 cents on the dollar for these, this addition is a good deal. We also, Thane and I worked together, identified all of the vehicles in our fleet that would qualify based on the requirements of the grant. We had 8 vehicles in our fleet that qualified for the grant, so we applied for all of them just to see what we would get. We ended up asking for 2.5 million of a 4.5 million total replacement cost, because we were suggesting that we would add some additional diesel what's the term I'm looking for there, Thane? To clean diesel better, we requested 55% of the total cost instead of 50%, meaning the grant would pay for 55, we would pay for 45. That's why it's not 2.5 million and 5 million. It's
If you had went to like a natural gas or something else to help out with that, they would give you more of a percentage. But we looked into that, and for our dump trucks, fire trucks, it's still evolving technology for that. So, but we put in for it anyway, because who knows? So we put in 55%.
Of the vehicles, of the 8 vehicles, 3 were dump trucks. And when you're replacing it, you can request money to replace whatever goes with that truck too. When we buy a truck, we put a snow plow and a sander on the back of it too. So part of that replacement cost, we included the cost of the plow and the sander as well. We also asked for 4 fire trucks. Those are all pricey. Those are over $700,000 each, ranging from $700,000 to $1.3 million. So a ladder truck, an engine truck, and we have a hazmat and extrication truck as well. And then we have the 1 senior citizen bus. Now admittedly, as we put this grant together, we didn't think that the hazmat and extrication truck would get approved because they're not driven very often. When there's a hazmat incident or they need to get the extrication truck, they're putting a few hundred miles a year on those trucks a year. So if you look at it from the mitigation trust perspective, they want to get vehicles off the road that are used a lot because they're currently polluting a lot. So when going in, we didn't think that the hazmat, extrication, or frankly the senior bus would be approved because they don't get very many miles. So we were crossing our fingers. We thought that we had a good chance for particularly the dump trucks and the fire trucks, except the fire trucks were so expensive. Would they get the bang for their buck for the fire trucks? So we didn't know. So what did we get? Well, I said Orem got all 4 of their proposed electric stations. That's $308,000 of a $616,000 total project. When it came to the diesel truck replacement, we received grants for 5 of the trucks, all 3 dump trucks, the ladder truck, and the bus.
You did a really good job of preparing that grant.
Well, thank you.
Proposal.
Yeah. For the 3 dump trucks, that's a total. We will be receiving $320,000 or $110,000 per truck, 50% of the cost of the truck, plow, and sander, for a total of $640,000. And then the ladder truck will be getting $663,000 of a $1.33 million vehicle. And then we were surprised to see that the senior bus was approved as well. We think that they looked at the total mileage of that. When that bus was new, it was used a lot more than it is now. And so they didn't look at the current use, and admittedly, it isn't used too much right now, but it probably could be if it was a better vehicle. So it's currently undecided whether or not we're going to purchase that or not. We're currently looking at that, but the money's there. And we may downsize it a little bit and get something a little smaller. But in total we got $1.07 million of essentially free money for vehicles that we needed to replace anyway. Arguably, the bus wasn't going to be replaced, but that's going to be, that'll have some great benefits to our streets funding, as well as the general fund when it comes to purchasing a ladder truck at half the cost. So what are the steps forward? Well, what's already been done is we've signed a letter of intent where our city manager sent a letter to the state saying we appreciate the opportunity to work with you, and yes, we are committed to purchasing these vehicles. The second step was to submit bids by the middle of September, where we went out and verified that our estimates that we suggested these vehicles would cost during the grant process were accurate. And we got those for the dump trucks. However, you just can't go spec out a fire truck real easily. So We also submitted our procurement process, the code that shows how we purchase things so that they can verify that we will go through a competitive process to procure something that we can't get a bid for in a short time frame. So that process has been completed. We've submitted all that paperwork, they're reviewing it. So we're currently on step 3, where the state is reviewing the information, the bids that and our procurement process, and they will be sending us an agreement, which will be between the city and the state, just stating that we will be using these funds appropriately and purchasing the vehicles according to whatever the agreement says. So once that agreement's signed, we'll have 3 years to complete the purchase.
Oh, nice.
We currently, pretty much everything is already funded. We have money sitting in an account ready to purchase.
So you could go ahead and purchase it and then get the money from the state, or you've already got this
That's
money?
what we have to do.
Okay.
So it will
Okay.
we are reimbursed.
Okay.
But I assume that there are communities that aren't as fortunate as us
Probably.
we've been saving for these vehicles, particularly the fire truck, setting money aside, and we were expecting to buy $1 million fire truck. Now we can just use half of that. We'll get half of that money back to put towards the next fire truck. So our plan right now is to purchase 2 dump trucks in this current year, and then we'll do 1 in FY21. We could get all 3 right now, but there's some wisdom in staggering them so we don't have to purchase 3 trucks in 1 year.
That's when you replace them, right?
10 years from
So,
now.
yeah.
Yeah. So we're staggering that. And I mentioned that currently the bus is unfunded, that we don't have an account set aside for that. But if the city manager decides, yes, let's go ahead, we can't pass up this money, let's go ahead and let's replace the bus.
So may I ask a question on that? So do you know why they don't use the bus as much? Do you even know
Just
that?
they don't, it's hard to get a driver is one reason. And they just don't have,
They just don't
they just
take
don't get out as
trips,
much as they
because
used
they
to.
used to use it to take.
They used to go to Wendover.
Yeah, they don't
They
do
used
that
to go
anymore.
to St. George,
Oh.
and they just don't.
Hmm.
They probably don't have the funding to do it.
Oh, okay.
So because
Thank
that does cost.
Do you think this will change that if they have a new bus? Do you think they might start programming those kinds of trips, or?
That's the theory.
Yeah.
I talked to Carl Hurst, the recreation director, about it recently, and I don't know. It says right now they're mainly running trips to Nephi. I don't know if they're in Nephi
What is
and
it?
Salt Lake. So, but still, if you had a new bus and it was functional,
Yeah.
maybe things would change.
I can't imagine Carl would let that pass if he has the opportunity to get a new bus. But, I mean, I'm thinking, wow, in a few years, I might want to take that bus to St. George.
You'll get on there and say, yeah, I was part of the
Yeah,
decision-making
yeah,
process.
I can say that if I can
Thank me
remember
for
to
this
go.
bus. One slide that I neglected to put in there that I thought of was, we're getting rid of 5 vehicles.
Oh,
What happens to those vehicles, you might wonder? Well, the grant requires us that we disable them by cutting a 3-inch by 3-inch hole in the engine block and cutting the frame in 4 in every.
No, there'd be 2, one on each frame rail,
Okay.
same size of hole, so it can't be driven or the engine can't be run.
So
Oh, that
we need
makes
to
sense.
completely disable them because they don't want our polluter that they just replaced to stay around. So the intent of this money is to completely remove the pollution created by those trucks. And so we have to permanently disable it.
And then provide evidence that we've done so for each vehicle. We haven't figured out how we'll do that yet, I don't think, have we?
No,
can you just take pictures?
We'll figure that out if it gets closer.
And you can part them
Well,
out.
it makes sense.
We may part them out, we may be able to, on the dump trucks, maybe there's a wrecking yard in Salt Lake, and we go up there and sell it to them and then cut the holes or something, I don't know. We'll figure that out when we get closer. But we do have to have them disabled and prove that it's been done. We will do that.
Yep. So anyway,
Wow.
a special thanks to Volkswagen for cheating. It brought us a windfall of money. We feel fortunate that we were able to compete. We ended up getting about about 5% of the total cost. I think our grant, when you rank them amongst the other 6 utilities, I'm sorry, this other 6 municipalities, that we got the most money. But we went in hoping we'd get 1 vehicle and ended up getting 5. So we felt fortunate for that.
You know who the other municipalities are?
Pleasant Grove is one. South Salt
Bountiful,
Lake,
I think.
Bountiful.
Salt Lake.
Should've-
In Utah County,
Yeah.
the only municipalities were Pleasant Grove and Orem.
Really?
Of course, UDOT and UTA is gonna come everywhere.
over.
The only, is that right, Reed?
Yep.
So, I know that others applied, but don't know.
We like to think they weren't as well written.
Well, I'm sure that's true.
I know American Fork did, I know Provo did. I don't know, I'm assuming there's more than that.
So how do these charging stations work then? They'll be for the general public, and you have to pay for it?
Right now, we have 1 charging station that's free during the day. I don't know if that will change or not. The charging stations, Development Services Department was asked to apply for that grant, so they're the ones that know the plan for that. And it seems I saw plans of where they were planning to put them, but that was long enough ago that it's escaped my memory.
They're all at the city center?
Yep.
And are they replacing the one that's there? I've heard that might be coming here.
Oh, really? I'm not sure.
Have you heard that thing?
I've never heard that.
So, do you have electric vehicles?
In our fleet, we do not.
So you just get a better vehicle that now is more, passes all the emissions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great presentation. Thank you for all your work. That's wonderful that Orem can benefit from Volkswagen's mess.
Shenanigans.
Yeah. We have a few projects we wanted to give you quick updates on.
Great.
Any further discussion on this VW grant or the replacement? So we have to come up with 50%. So in order to save money, you have to come up with money, which is the same thing with our streetlights, right? It wasn't just like
Yeah.
it's all free.
Yeah.
You have to actually spend money to save money, but it pays dividends in the long run. So I've asked Neil to provide some updates, and then I have some, and then Reed will wrap it up with some updates in the parks. Some projects that we're completing and in the middle of, actually.
I don't have a slideshow today. I just wanted to first invite both of you to apply for jobs that we have at Public Works. We're having some staffing challenges that's not unique to just us, but the economy in general is at a place where we're having staffing challenges. So I just wanted to start with that. And if you guys, any of you are interested in
water distribution.
if any of you guys are interested in working in water distribution,
Yeah, I was gonna say, what are those positions?
then we encourage you to
Water
apply.
distribution.
As you recall, the master plans for the utilities were a pay-as-you-go plan, and so on the water side, we have saved a lot of money for a water storage tank. We are in negotiations with Alpine School District to locate that tank somewhere near Mountain View High School on the south side, and so baseball, softball, other fields are in consideration, and we are actively working with them and their board to finalize a location for that. We have saved up about $8 million for that, so we're carrying that on the books. Automated metering infrastructure is underway. We've replaced about 4,000 meters. Right now we are waiting anxiously for the communication devices that the meters can communicate, and we anticipate about another 3,000 meters this winter. So we are still reading the meters manually throughout the city. The ones that we've replaced, we are actually driving around and collecting the data with a remote data collection system. So that's good that we're not reading them manually. We're going to stop reading meters at the end of October and focus all the efforts of those man hours onto replacing the existing meters. By the end of the winter, we hope to have about 7,000, 8,000 meters replaced, and then the communication devices should be here, and then come next spring be starting to read about 8,000 meters remotely.
I assume that's why the meter cover is different.
Yeah, did you get a different meter cover? So the meter lid that goes with those is plastic, and it has a little cutout for the piece of antenna that comes through it. I think I brought that in last time, so I won't do that again. Interesting note, the Utah Lake study is studying the nutrient loading. I am on the steering committee for that study that's anticipated to last about 3 years. The steering committee has directed the science panel on what questions to ask so that we can then formulate a task for the scientists to study for a couple of years, and then come back to the steering committee with a response which will then dictate some of the nutrient loading. When I say nutrients, I'm typically talking about phosphorus initially, nitrogen as well, but that will answer some of the questions, hopefully, about the algae blooms on Utah Lake and how that's going to affect our treatment facility, including Timpanogos and Provo and the others that discharge to it. Another aspect of the master plan was to allocate money for projects. On a pay-as-you-go basis, we are allocating about $1 million to sewer liners, and so we are actively lining the sewer pipes and rejuvenating those. Our previous budget for those was about $100,000 per year, so a great rehabilitation tool there. We have also included about $1 million of treatment plant upgrades between different pieces of equipment and monitoring equipment so that we can monitor the process flow at the treatment plant in more locations to know. It's kind of like an assembly line of making something. If you know where you are along the line, it helps you with your end product. And so we're upgrading the treatment plant to about $1 million a year in that area. In addition to those projects, we are also replacing sewer lines, about $500,000 a year. Things that we can't line or that have shifted, or the pipe is not in good enough shape. And so that budget in the past has been closer to $150,000 as well. With the pay-as-you-go plan, we save up a lot of money for our water projects, and then we spend it. We are replacing water mains as well with the street projects that go in front of us. So if we repave a street or something, we do replace those. So we have not actively targeted areas that we need to replace as of yet, because the master plan called for that process to happen a little bit later with the funding in that schedule. So, any questions on those projects? All right, that is my update for now.
Thank you. Very good. All right.
Just a
You
couple
and then
other
you, right?
updates.
Okay.
We have two major projects that are going on in the city right now. Well, there are many, but these two are a part of the bond projects regarding the fitness center. You see a map up here, an overview of the fitness center, and I have some pictures, and I'm going to ask Lane to give us an update on this project, as well as the library hall project, which is at the city center. Both of these projects are, I think the funding for these is just under $30 million altogether. So on this project here, what has taken place is the east side of this building structure has been removed altogether. Actually, along this alignment here, approximately. So all of this is gone on the east side. We have some pictures here now that show that.
Oh my gosh.
You can see
I
kind
need
of
to look better when I drive by there, don't I?
yeah.
Every day.
They're very aggressive in their demo and their clearing and grubbing and removing of bad materials and so forth, and recycling a good portion of the materials as well. But this is big deconstruction on the east side that's taking care of all of this. You can see kind of a path where the track was, approximately like at this location, like here. That's what was in the basement altogether.
Can I tell you how excited I am to get rid of that track?
Really?
I always felt it was downstairs. I always felt like closed in.
It was.
So,
It was closed in.
personal note.
So this is looking from above. They have a drone out here taking pictures and videos